welcome to the Click and Collect Livestock webinar. Our speakers this evening will be Tim McRae and the Regional Agency Services team from AuctionsPlus, and District Vet Linda Searle, who's going to walk us through the Nlis database transfer process, so for after you've bought your livestock. My name's Kimberly Beer. I'm a Land Services Officer from Murray Local Land Services. I'm based out of the Deniliquin office, and I'm going to be your host this evening. So before we get into preparations, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting today. For me, that's the Wamba Wamba Parapa Parapa country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So this webinar is part of a series that's being hosted by the Farm Business Resilience Program, which is an initiative of the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund and the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, being delivered by New South Wales Local Land Services. So we're going to use Slido this evening for our interaction. So you can ask questions of the panelists and answer. We've got a few polls set up for you. So to get into Slido, you can either use the QR code that's about to pop up on your screen, or you can just Google it on a separate browser. And then in the little meeting code box at the top, just add the word livestock, and you should be able to join our meeting Slido. If you're having any issues with this, just pop it in the chat box, and Camilla, our moderator this evening, will help you out. If you have any other technical issues, if you can't hear or can't see, also pop those in the Zoom chat box and Camilla will be able to help out. We'll just run through some practice questions if everyone can log in to Slido. So the first one up here is, have you ever used Slido before? And throughout the presentations this evening, you'll also be able to use the Q&A function in Slido to be able to ask your questions. So you can add them as you go. And we'll go through the questions at the end, and hopefully we'll get through a few. If we don't get through them all, we'll send out a fact sheet at the end with the webinar recording. So it looks like we're getting a few responses. What's your closest town? This will be an interesting one. Hopefully Sydney looks like it's pretty popular. A few from Orange. Getting a bit of rain, no doubt. So what type of ag industry are you involved in? Hopefully we'll get a range of different answers here. A few different ones. Mixed farming seems very popular, which is a good sign. A few cropping. And what is your current occupation? Seems to be a lot of government employees on here this evening. A few farmers, that's good. We will also have a feedback survey at the end of the webinar for everyone, if you could fill it out through Slido as well. For your ag industry representatives, that's good. And type of livestock operation. This one's definitely aimed at the farmers. Oh, a lot of other. Possibly the government employees. What social media platform do you use the most? Mine is definitely Facebook. Seems like I'm not the only one. A few Instagram, a bit of YouTube. YouTube's always good for an explainer video. And what platform do you use to buy and sell most? These are really good questions to give our panelists a bit of an idea about what sort of things you'd like to hear about as well, and what your experience level is, to tailor their presentations a bit. A lot of local sale yards, a few AuctionsPlus, which is good. And who buys and sells online. A lot of agents. And do you have an NLIS database? This will be an interesting one. Linda is very excited to see everyone tick yes. And knows how to use it, would be good too. That's a good sign. We've got quite a few people have an account. Quite a few more at least have one. That's good. Don't use it, but that's okay. So that's the end of our practice questions. And as you can see now, it's popped over to the Q&A section. So if you do have any questions pop up during the speakers' presentations, you can just pop them straight in this box and we'll be able to ask them at the end. So this evening, we're going to hear from 3 different speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Hopefully we'll have enough time. Any questions we don't get through at the end, we'll send out a fact sheet with the recording of the webinar. So now I'd like to introduce Tim McRae. Tim's going to be our first speaker. He's the Chief Economist for AuctionsPlus, which is Australia's leading digital agricultural marketplace. Tim leads the AuctionsPlus Market and Insights team and is currently overseeing the expansion into providing market commentary, industry insights and forecasts for the Australian lamb, sheep and cattle industries. Prior to AuctionsPlus, Tim was the Chief Economist for Meat and Livestock Australia. He also spent several years with the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries, directing the Economic and Analysis portfolio within the Strategy and Policy Division. So over to you, Tim.
I hope you can all hear and see the first slide there, which is the AuctionsPlus digital ag market. What I hope to give you today is an overview of AuctionsPlus for those who aren't overly familiar with it. We'll give you a background of the historical analysis, what we're currently seeing through AuctionsPlus. I'm then going to pass over to our 3 regional agency services team members that are online. Hamish Cook, who looks after Southern New South Wales, Holly Baker, who does Northern New South Wales, and bringing up the rear will be Hugh Courts, who looks after Central New South Wales, who are far more familiar with how AuctionsPlus works in a day-to-day setting. And I think we'll be able to cover off a lot of the questions and issues that people online may have about AuctionsPlus. So look, for a bit of background of AuctionsPlus, it is an overnight sensation that's taken 4 decades to get to being Australia's largest livestock market. As I said, we're Australia's largest livestock market in the same way Amazon is the world's largest retailer. The physical aspect of what we do certainly doesn't apply, but you know, we had over 815,000 head of cattle offered through AuctionsPlus last year and 4.5 million head of sheep. So from that context, by far and away the largest livestock selling outlet in Australia. We have 180,000 unique web users per month, about 3.7 to 4 million total page views and over 100,000 registered users for the AuctionsPlus platform. In the last financial year, AuctionsPlus did about $2.4 billion worth of gross merchandising sales, a huge increase on previous years, acknowledging that the disruptions caused by COVID and the movement disruptions, whilst they hindered a lot of sales, it certainly did help the AuctionsPlus business, and we expect that to taper off in the coming years. As I said, we had over 815,000 head of cattle offered and 4.4 million head of sheep. And what I want to take you through is just what we've seen with those offerings, some of the trends we're seeing in the market, and where we see things going over the next 12 months. In the cattle market, our top 5 selling regions were Southern Queensland, Northwest Slopes and Plains, Central West New South Wales, the real cow-calf producing hubs of Australia. The top selling regions, again, dominated by Southern Queensland, largely due to either the attention that the lot feeding and processing sector gets back into that region, but also the inter-regional trade we have seen with the better seasons. The biggest change we've seen in 2021 is the significant increase in the number of PTIC heifers that are being offered by producers. This is both an indication that rebuilding efforts are widespread through the industry, and looking at where prices are at the moment, that's no surprise, but also an indication of just how engaged a lot of producers are, knowing that that is the product that most buyers are looking for. We nearly had over 100, we had 999,993 head of PTIC heifers offered in the last financial year. And what we're seeing at the moment in the market is the clearance rate for those lines being very volatile on a week-to-week basis. And that's a combination of producers at the moment through AuctionsPlus are very aggressive in their reserve setting. And it's really almost a challenge to buyers to step up and meet that mark to ensure a transaction takes part. From the steers that we're seeing, I mean, if anyone can find any good lines of under 200 kilogram steers at the moment, you're doing very well, and you're going to have to fight very hard for them. Week in, week out, we're seeing clearance rates of 100% for those product. And in recent times, we've been able to divide those prices up, looking at both Queensland and Angus cattle as categories for what's going on there. Given the season, given that an EYCI at 1,100 cents is just phenomenal. Demand right through the southern markets is extremely strong. I would expect, 4 figures for the EYCI to continue probably through until we see that big first flush of weaners in late February, early March. But we expect to see continued big numbers coming into the market, but also very big numbers in the price required to purchase those. On the sheep side of things, I feel a bit sorry for the sheep and lamb market. If it wasn't for the cattle market, it would get much more headlines about just how well it's performing. Again, the major regions, the major buying and selling regions that we see for AuctionsPlus are the traditional sheep regions through New South Wales. Clearance rates in the past 2 years have been fairly steady. What we have seen in the last 18 months is a lot of sheep and bloodlines coming back from South Australia and Victoria that were liquidated out of New South Wales in the 2019 drought year. So with the AuctionsPlus information that we can see, we're able to map very closely where stock have come from, where they're going, and importantly, trace that back over the years just to see whether flock demographics have changed over time and the impacts of things like drought. I would expect, and our forecasts come out in coming weeks, I think the lamb market is rock solid moving ahead. It's one of the real unsung heroes of the ag sector. Demand internationally is still very strong. And with that underpins a rebuilding Australian sheep flock that will continue to see very good prices for any breeding stock, whilst conditions stay favourable. From an AuctionsPlus point of view, AuctionsPlus Market Insights, we released weekly price and outlook stories. Just a sample of the ones there we've released recently. Partly due to COVID in recent years, we had our busiest stud selling season in 2021, but we also provide analysis and look through the analytics of what we're seeing from everywhere from just general price movement through numbers, supply and demand, but also dig deeper in those and look at what's happening across breeds, what's happening across regions, and what's happening through different categories within the market. An example here of just the weekly cattle summary we put out each Friday. We do a similar one for sheep and lambs, but particularly at the moment, we're focusing on highlighting where the stock are coming from, as you can see there with the map of Australia and the heat map, and then where they are purchased. So you'll hear later on about how actual AuctionPlus works, but the weaner and yearling listings are what stock are being made available up to the Friday sale, and the weaner and yearling purchases are where those stock were, who purchased those stock over the next 48 hours and where they went. Not the most exciting and variable maps there, but we have seen in recent weeks and months some big changes. If I showed you a similar map for sheep and lambs, huge numbers down in South Australia and Western Victoria, and you look at the purchases and they're moving back up into central New South Wales. One of the main things we want to provide the industry out of AuctionsPlus is more detailed price reporting. Currently, what you can see on the screen now is our weekly cattle averages. And I talked about, young cattle less than 200 kilograms. On the week ending the 12th, the average was $1,126, but ranged, $1,000 from the low and the high. And particularly the clearance rate there. We hope particularly to share these kind of prices with producers and agents, importantly, to make sure that when stock are being sold through AuctionsPlus, that reserve levels are within the ballpark of where the market is performing. When we see big falls in our clearance rates, a lot of that has to do with a very big disconnect between expectation for the vendor and willingness from the buyer. This shows you the sheep and lamb categories we use. You can see last week we had 26,000 crossbred lambs, average price, clearance rates. The last few weeks we've seen some real volatility in the clearance rate for sheep and lambs. A combination of, I think, a lot of producers out there are waiting to see a big spring flush, which I just don't think is going to come onto the market given how much feed is available right across Eastern Australia. But we've also seen some volatile prices for non-station mated, particularly merino ewes and hoggets in the last few weeks, as I think a lot of producers take stock about just where they are at this point of year and harvest and all the rain issues that have been coming recently. Additionally, the challenge of getting shearers. What we also want to provide the industry is further broken down prices. So these are the weekly prices for all the Angus cattle offered through AuctionPlus for the week, which comes in at around, I think it was about 7,000 for this week. And you can see there that, we do it through the different weight ranges. And really, in recent times, we've been able to do this for the top 8 cattle breeds that we see through AuctionsPlus. So when agents are setting price or talking with producers, they're able to refer back to those prices and say, well, okay, this is what Hereford cattle are bringing, and this is what you're selling, and make sure that those reserve levels that they're looking to set with the producer will maximise their chances of having a sale. Leading on to that, I might throw now to Hamish Cook, who's our Regional Agency Services Team Rep for Southern New South Wales. Hamish has been with AuctionsPlus for many years, and he'll just take you briefly through the actual buying and selling process of AuctionsPlus.
Thank you, Tim. I'll just touch on from a very high level, initial engagements with the AuctionsPlus sort of purchasing side of the platform. If you haven't already, buying on AuctionsPlus is very much, you can do it as a private entity or through your agent. But if you're looking to get into that yourself, start to look at some of Tim's numbers and make your own decisions on the click of the button. The first steps there are just simply getting registered. And then the next step would be completing a buyer training. It's about a 15-minute sort of online quiz, a few different resources, video resources there to watch. And that just runs you through how the platform works, what are your responsibilities, and what steps you take to, one, get into an auction, being the highest bidder, and then doing the post-sale interactions. On that note, you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, just a screen grab of what one of our catalogues looks like. You'll see, if you look closely towards the top, there are a few filters activated. So I'm looking for a line of Angus, 100% Angus heifers in New South Wales. That's only a portion of them, but there are filters that you can use to, one, in review prices that you're looking for, like Tim looked at previously. You can look at similar lines that you might be looking to sell, or when you're looking to purchase, really hone down the lots that you're looking to buy. Joining an auction is the next steps. That is, you click the button, there'll be set bid increments, and you'll either meet the reserve or be an underbidder if the reserve is not met. If you are the winning bidder, your buyer responsibilities include, but not limited to, arranging and taking care of delivery and transportation. That's one of them. Obviously, NILS transfer is a buyer's responsibility in this circumstance unless specified otherwise. And as we know, fit to load is everyone's responsibility. So make your adjustments on condition if you're looking at sort of lighter stock that are, further away than what you might be looking at from your typical yards. The other one there is obviously payment. Payment is listed terms unique to every assessment. And you can also, through creating your account, list a nominated preferred settling agent. If you do have an agency that you like to work with locally, they can take care of that side of things for you. We'll just go to the next slide, please, Tim. On the flip side, selling is always down to you and your agent's sort of choice on when and how to sell. But to do so, you will need to engage an AuctionPlus accredited assessor. They have all gone through training as a livestock agent to meet our standardized sort of assessment expectations. The idea of that is to create a level playing field. You can look at any accredited assessor's assessment and expect the same sort of quality and terminology. As you can see there, a few notes on the levels of assessment and what to look for. Obviously between yourself and the agent, you can choose how to market your stock online. When the assessor visits your property, they will do so in person because there'll be a physical assessment that they'll complete. Again, that includes, but not limited to, things like weights, age, breed, fat scores, the husbandry history, and breeding history, and plenty more other things. There is even a section in the assessment for vendor comments, so you can pass on all the things that you like and have worked on in your stock. Finally, when the assessor has completed their assessment on farm, we do recommend that you review the assessment they've completed. They'll have a form with them that they've filled out, and signing off on that information that they've written down, because that will be listed online and that will be held to our terms and conditions once it is marketed on AuctionsPlus. I'll probably keep setting reserves into the next slide as well, if you want to flick over there, please, Tim. So then your stock have been assessed, they've been listed and advertised on AuctionsPlus. We have our regular commercial sale days. So typically sheep and lamb will be in the national sales on a Tuesday after lunch. And there is a secondary sale there on the Thursday you'll see at lunchtime as well. And then for sheep and cattle, for cattle, we've got the weaner and yearling sale first thing in the morning, followed by eastern states. If you're not familiar with those terms, weaner and yearling is typically our young trade cattle, and eastern states is typically our breeder and restocker cattle. We just keep it separated there to keep our markets a little bit in a bit of a synergy there, and get the right buyers with looking at the right stock. As you'll see, you as a vendor on AuctionsPlus, between yourself and the agent, you get to set a reserve. You will know exactly what you will make if it meets that reserve. Otherwise, it will be passed in. What that means, if it is passed in, the reserve is actually made available to the underbidder. They can meet that within 90 minutes. Otherwise, it then passes to free negotiation with any other interested parties. Again, from that stage, vice versa on buying, selling, the buyers that will take care of transport and delivery. So you'll know where the stock is going and who's purchased them. You'll also have obviously a set nominated delivery window that suits you. That can be set by you in the assessment. I guess probably the last thing you would want to know as a vendor is costs. The base starting rate for listing sheep and lambs is 97 cents a head, excluding, and for sheep and for cattle, it's $7.50. Each assessment gives you one free re-offer. So if you do not sell your stock in the first auction, you can re-offer that in a subsequent auction the following week, free of charge. That gives you the opportunity to reassess, obviously, your prices, weights, scores, conditions, etc. And as you can see, that assessment's got to be completed and sold within the 30-day period. That's all from me. Thanks, Tim. I think we're passing on to Holly now.
Thanks, Hamish. I'll throw to Holly Baker, our Maximise Exposure Extraordinaire. Holly is our Northern New South Wales regional rep and has been with AuctionsPlus for 2 years. Over to you, Holly.
Hello, everyone. I am going to quickly run you through on ways to utilise AuctionsPlus, not only for selling, but also for buying, so that you're really getting the most out of your experience on AuctionsPlus. So as Tim mentioned, the national platform that AuctionsPlus has a lot of eyes on it each and every day. And so if you're selling on AuctionsPlus, you want to be maximising your exposure. So the first way to be able to do that we recommend is having your stock assessed and your assessment uploaded by your assessor and agent as early as possible, because the earlier that it's on our website in the upcoming auctions and the catalogues, the more eyes that you're going to have on the stock that you have listed. And what you can also do is that if all your assessment is completed on time by your assessor, they are able to publish all of the assessment details prior to the auction being catalogued. And so what that means is that in the lead up to an auction being catalogued, everyone that's scrolling through the details can only see a limited amount of information. However, if you're able to speak with your agent and they can publish those details, that means that they have access to everything that's in the assessment, because otherwise those details aren't available until the auction is catalogued, which, as Hamish said, is a day before either the Tuesday lamb and sheep sales or the Friday cattle sales. And one thing that we've really seen a big uptake of with the current age is being able to maximise your exposure through social media. So we've seen not only an uptake of agents using social media to promote stock that they have, but also vendors as well. So in that, as you can see in that screenshot up the top, that's what we call a brochure view. So that is an option an assessor has to be able to have a PDF created of their assessment that they are listing, and they can be shared on any social media platform. So as we saw, Facebook is a common platform that you all in the presentation seem to use a lot. So those can be shared on there, and links to the specific assessment. And as has been discussed in terms of reserves and having those expectations, that is something that we really want to consider when you are selling on AuctionsPlus. So we've recently released a new tool called Livestock BI, which gives you really specialised market insights into what stock has been doing on AuctionsPlus. So that if you were selling, you could be able to use a tool such as Livestock BI to search for similar articles that you are selling, to be able to have that market research behind you, so that you can set a reserve that you know is in line with what the market is doing. And finally, another option that you have there is to do advertising on the AuctionsPlus website. There's a number of different spots. So if there was an upcoming feature line that you were selling on AuctionsPlus, herd or flock dispersal, stud sales, any of the above, that's also another option for you to maximise your exposure. And I also realised I just didn't touch on the buy now, which is another feature that you can put a price on your stock before it goes to auction. And so that doesn't have to be the reserve that you go with in the auction. They can still be changed up until an hour before the auction begins, but it's just it's an opportunity to put a price on your livestock that someone can come along and purchase at any time. So Tim, can you just go to the next slide for me, please? So then to the other side of the transaction, looking at buying, there's another number of different ways that you can really get the most out of looking on a national platform. As we know, there are large volumes of stock in our sales each week. So we've really done, in recent times, we've improved our search function on the website. And so what that means is that you can search through filters that you can see on your screen. You can search through any stock that is listed on the catalogue, not specific to a single catalogue. It can be across the whole website. And so what that means is that you can really drill down and say that you're looking for Angus steers and heifers each week. You can be searching that in a certain location and save that search as well, so that if you are looking for them week in, week out, you can save that search so you can come back to it each week and find what stock's available for what you're looking for. And along that same path, if there is lots that you see that you are interested in and you want to keep your eye on, you can favourite them. So you can view all of your favourites in one spot through your dashboard. And that allows you also, when the auction's running, to have all the lots that you've pre-selected and picked out prior to be sitting in one spot in your auction screen. And so Hamish already touched on when those catalogues are available with the full assessment details. And you can also, as I mentioned, when selling on AuctionsPlus, you can use Livestock BI to also for when you're buying. So to be able to search for similar articles that you may be selling, that you are wanting to buy, you can look at what they're making, so it can really help you budget and know what you're willing to pay and what you might have to pay to be wanting to buy what you're after. So that's me done. So I'll then pass on to Hugh.
Thanks, Holly. Look, finally, we'll just briefly go to Hugh Courts, who is our Regional Agency Services Rep in Central New South Wales. Hugh has the pleasure of talking about some of the issues we found over the years with AuctionsPlus and the main complaints or misinterpretations that we see with users using AuctionsPlus. Over to you, Hugh.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, so I'll sort of speak about the disputes and the hesitation to buy online, as it's different from the traditional sale yards in not being able to view livestock physically when you're buying them, as well as concern for the quality of livestock that will be delivered. So of the transactions that AuctionsPlus annually do, there's a reported issue of less than 5% of all transactions across all commodities on the platform. And look, when dealing with livestock disputes, can and will happen. When these disputes are reported, AuctionsPlus is supportive of both parties and both sides of the transaction to help through negotiations and understanding how or why the issue may have occurred to reach a resolution. So these disputes, when the livestock are delivered, may come from the following circumstances. Most commonly, it's saying something has happened to the livestock in between the time they were assessed, auctioned, and then delivered to the buyer, and they've changed the condition compared to when they were initially assessed. In these situations, it's recommended the accredited delivery agent who was present at the assessment attends the delivery with the vendor to ensure these livestock are fit to load for their intended journey, as Hamish touched on, for the condition and depending on how far they're going. And it's also not uncommon for any issues to be resolved prior to trucking if they're notified on farm after that assessment and prior to transport. Other disputes may arise from if there's been an error in the information provided on the assessment or an misinterpretation of the information provided by the buyer. And lastly, the livestock may have not been correctly assessed at the time. Majority of these issues are reported are resolved promptly by the buyer and selling agent agreeing on mutual resolution. However, rare times when negotiations are unsuccessful, the dispute may escalate to arbitration for resolution. In terms of buying livestock, what to be aware of, our terms do offer buyer protection for certain disputes, which allow our buyers to bid with confidence. We recommend being aware of areas which are not currently covered by our terms. With the exception of the progeny breeds, if they don't, calves and lambs come out as the expected breed, all other terms must be reported to AuctionsPlus in writing within 48 hours of livestock being delivered to property, regardless of the day of week. And AuctionsPlus expect buyers to inspect all lots purchased thoroughly upon their arrival. And if you do have any issues, to report them immediately. The best practice would be taking photos or videos and consult additional parties, aka your agents, settling agent, vet advice, etc. And here I've got the lodging a claim form with AuctionsPlus to make things as efficient and effective as possible. If you do have any concerns, to get everything in writing to us to give you that confidence to bid online. Look, as Tim spoke of earlier, and the high prices we're seeing at the moment, a trend we're seeing with livestock across all stock categories is that the buying party paying a higher value for livestock aligns with a higher expectation of this article is due to be delivered. So it's critical that if there are any concerns or questions regarding these lots, that you make necessary pre-sale inquiries with the agent prior to bidding. All agents and vendors are quite open to taking a call before sales if you do have any concerns within those assessments. Just flick to the next slide, please, Tim. As Hamish touched on earlier, the accreditation process, this is reviewed yearly and audited as necessary with our level 1, 2, and 3 assessors to give buyers and sellers the confidence of using those assessors. And in regards to buying, we're constantly reviewing our onboarding process for new users across livestock and other commodities online. And lastly, we're always open to feedback to ensure both buyers and sellers have the best experience on AuctionsPlus and how we can make things more efficient and effective in utilising the platform. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Hugh. I think that's about it for AuctionsPlus part of this. So I want to stop sharing my screen and pass back to you, Kimberly.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks to the AuctionsPlus team. That was an awesome presentation. I think everyone will have a much better idea of it now. So I'm going to hand over to Linda Searle, the District Vet from Murray Local Land Services. She's our final speaker for this evening. So once you've purchased your livestock, you've got to complete an Nlis database transfer. So Linda's going to walk you through how to do that. Linda's the District Vet for Murray. She's based out of Deniliquin and she's had 7 years experience at Local Land Services. Throughout this time, she's been part of numerous disease investigations, which relied on accurate tracing of the livestock's movement. So having seen how important it is in her everyday job and in tracking disease, it makes her very passionate and driven to make sure that the tracking and tracing process of all livestock moving around New South Wales is done properly. So she works directly with local sale yards, agents, producers to ensure that livestock are traceable through the correct ear tags, movement documents, and the database transfers. So over to you, Linda.
All right, thanks for that, Kimberly. So I'm Linda. I am the district vet in Denny, and today what I'm going to do is take you through how to do the database movement. Basically, when it comes to livestock traceability, it's important because we need it for disease investigations, residue tracebacks, but it's also really important for market access. And the traceability of livestock relies on 4 things. It relies on the land where the livestock live, having a property identification code to identify it, which is also called a PIC. All of the livestock need to be identified with a tag. And then when livestock move from one PIC to another, they need to have an approved movement document, and then that transfer needs to be put on the NLAS database. If you're buying through a traditional physical sale yard, or if it's an on-farm like a stud sale, or if you're sending stuff to the abattoir, they will do the transfers for you. Same with a show, they will do that transfer. But if you're buying privately, such as the online platforms or through your agent or from a neighbor or something like that, it's up to the person receiving the stock, so the new owner, to do the transfers, and they've got to be done within 2 days of the stock being transferred. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So hopefully you can now see the Nlis database come up. So basically, the first thing you need to do a database transfer is have a database account. So if you don't have an account, I noticed most of you said you had one, but you don't use it. But for those of you who don't have one, you can get one at the same place that you log in. So www.nlis.com.au. So if you need to register, if you don't have an account, you click here. Otherwise, you log in, and it will come up with your login. Now, I'm actually going to do the transfer on the training database that we have. So this is identical to the real database, except that it comes up as green instead of blue. So we will log in here. Now, if you've used the database before, you may not be familiar with the dashboard presentation. You may be more familiar with the original backdrop. It doesn't really matter which way you prefer to do it. The information that you put in and the way you do the transfer is still the same. I'm going to switch to the new dashboard today because it's got just a few more features and it's a little bit easier to use. So we're actually, this account here is linked to a couple of different picks. So if you have a couple of properties with different picks, you might have a similar thing. We're going to be using this pick here today. So you can see the dashboard already tells us there's no active cattle devices on here at the moment. We've had some movements on and off in the past. So to start with today, I'm going to walk you through how to do a cattle transfer. The main difference between cattle and sheep in New South Wales, besides the fact that they're different animals when we're talking databases, is the difference in ear tags. So cattle have electronic ear tags, so they're all individually identifiable. Whereas sheep have a manual tag, which have the pick of the property they were born on in their ear. So when you're doing a transfer for cattle, you need 2 bits of information. We need to have the NVD from the transfer, and we also need to know the tag numbers. Now, you can either use the RFIDs, which is the numbers that come up when you scan the cattle using a wand or a scanner, or you can use the NLS ID, which is the number written on the outside of the tag. Now, they're very long numbers, so I prefer to use the scanned numbers just because it's really easy to make a mistake when you're doing the NLS ID. But if you've just got, you know, one bull coming and you don't have a scanner, you know, sometimes it's easier to take a photo so that you can see what the code is and then do your transfer later. So we'll pop these down for a moment. Now, I apologize, I am going to have to keep flicking the NVD up so that you can look at. When you're really doing it yourself, usually you'll have a paper version of the NVD, so it's a little bit easier to do. Alternatively, if you do have an electronic version, you might find it easier to put the copy of the NVD you're looking at onto either a different screen on your computer or like a phone or a tablet or something else, just so you don't have to keep flicking between. So we are going to do livestock moved onto my property. So we've selected this pick and we're working with cattle. So there's 2 ways that you can upload the information. You can either upload it manually or you can upload a file. Now, to make it a CSV file, there's a template here of how you can make it. You can do it in Excel or Notepad and then save it as a CSV file and upload it. But I find it slightly quicker to do it this other way. So this is what we're going to do. So the first thing we need to do is just put our tags in. So we can just copy and paste that into here. So these are our 20 tags from our cattle. The next thing we need to know is the pick we're moving them from. So with our NVD, you can find the pick of where the animals have come from printed here on the NVD. So in this circumstance, it's NF 479999. They're moving to this pick, so that's pre-filled for you. Then we need the waybill number, which can be found up here. So this one is 3 and then 8 sevens. And the date they were moved. So these ones were actually moved yesterday. So remember, we've got 2 days to do our transfer. So we'll pop in yesterday's date, press continue. So this will then load all of that information that you've just put in. So this stage will look exactly the same if you've used the file upload technique or if you've done it manually. Then you press process data down here and it's done. So you can see here it says that it's successful. If we go back to our dashboard, you'll now see our 20 tags sitting there and they all have lifetime traceability. So now we're going to move on and do our sheep transfer. Now sheep is slightly easier because they're a mob-based movement and we don't have any electronic tags here at the moment. So we're going to do them as mob-based. So I'm going to change this here to working with sheep. And we're going to notify the database of mob-based movement onto our pick. So once again, we have the choice between typing in the details or doing a file upload. So we're going to type in the details again. So then we need the information which is on our NVD. So we are moving sheep and we're moving them today. The from pick, we are going to find here. So same as our cattle NVD, 3. Number of head will be down here, so 350. Now we've got to select which of our 3 picks we're using. So we are moving on to this pick here. The serial number of the waybill, so 9876543-2. And now other brands or picks listed on NVD. So this is really important when we're dealing with non-vendor bred sheep, which we are in this instance. So as I mentioned before, with sheep, they have the pick of the property they were born on in their ear. So if they're moving from a property they weren't born on, i.e. non-vendor bred, then they are going to have a different number. So we need to record this number as well. So we're gonna pop that here. Okay, 430377. There was no goats in this consignment, so we don't need to worry about that. Have they been bred by the vendor? Now, there are circumstances where they might actually have a different pick, but they are bred by the vendor. So we need to check the NVD. So we've got they're non-vendor bred and they've had them for more than 12 months. So we're going to pop that information in. Now, that's the only part that you have to fill in. You do have the option of uploading the NVD image. I really like people to do this if they can, because it gives us extra information that we might not have on this transfer. So if we have a close look at this NVD here, even though it says that they're non-vendor bred, we've actually got merino ewes, which look like it's the case there. But then we have some crossbred lambs, which I think probably are vendor bred, but we don't have the option of doing one either way. So it's counting them all together. So we don't know that information until we look at the NVD. The way to get around this problem when you're selling is to write separate NVDs for your vendor bred and your non-vendor bred. But obviously in this circumstance, we're buying, so we deal with what we're given. So now it does have to be in one of these formats when you upload. So JPEG and PNG are common picture files. So like if you've taken a picture of it on your phone, if you have a physical copy, PDF might be if you're using a scanner, what it comes up as. So our file upload here is there. So there it's showing up. Press continue. Continue again. And we're done. So if we go back to our home screen here, you'll see here that it's telling us that we've just done our mob-based movement. So that is me done. And I think we're going back to Kimberly to start questions.
Thanks, Linda. That was very informative. There will be no excuses now, I'm sure, for people not having completed their transfers. So we're pretty tight for time, so we're going to run straight into the Q&A. Before we do that, I just want to have a quick plug for our feedback survey. Anyone who's on the Slido, if you could just pop into the polls and fill it out and provide us with some feedback, we'd really appreciate that. So now over to our Q&A. Tim, I think the first question's for you. What are the trends of sheep and cattle breeds, Angus Sema Premium and Aussie White?
Yeah, look, let's start with the cattle, with the breeds. Look, Angus, I don't want to say dominates, but it very heavily is the largest number we see come through. We did the 8 main breeds that we see through AuctionsPlus, 4 Boss Indicas, 4 Boss Taurus, and it covered about 90% of all the livestock that came through. And a pure Angus and Angus cross are very heavily influenced, and I think it's reflective of what the industry does and very much the influence of the feedlot and Japanese market on the Australian industry over the years. Seen some growth and some spectacular prices for what I would call emerging breeds, particularly Speckled Park. Saw some big results for some Speckled Park heifers out of Tassie recently, and we saw them go into central New South Wales. No major shifts within the breeds of cattle that we've seen, unlike sheep. On the sheep and lamb side of things, we see that real big meat producing shift. The Aussie Whites have hogged the headlines very much in the last 6 to 8 months. But, underlying that is the combined drive into those bigger sheep meat breeds. The numbers we see of the Dorpers and the shedding lines have grown significantly. And when we do our little heat maps to where they're being, something like the Aussie Whites are offered to them where they're purchased, really seeing them spread out, if I can use it, a bit like a COVID map. It starts off nice and tight and spreads as those breeds and those genetics are going. So I certainly think that's the major trend we're seeing, if we're to look across the two, is that sheep meat shedding breed, whether it's the perceived easier animal husbandry, or it's the inability to get shearers, or it's just where the industry is moving. That's the main one we've seen with the Aussie Whites and the sheep breeds.
Thanks, Tim. Our next question is for Linda. Is using an ENVD the same as doing a database transfer?
Okay, so no, they are completely separate things. An ENVD is basically just an electronic form of your old traditional paper LPA accredited NVD. It's replaced the EDEC, so we don't have EDECs anymore. The ENVD will, if it's set up, email itself to the transporter and where it's going, but it's just a way of storing that information. It's not a way of actually doing the database transfer. You still got to do that.
That makes sense. So to the AuctionsPlus guys, what other enterprises does the AuctionsPlus platform support? Can I buy a horse? You can buy a horse. I'll take this one. But you can buy a horse, you can buy a working dog, and they probably cost about the same for a real good one. Look, the basis of the commercial cattle and sheep underpins the model. But look, the expansion into working dogs, horses, alpacas, goats is actually, I would say, is more mainstream than the others. The machinery and clearing sales have exploded in the last 18 months. Again, that's a bit of the movement restrictions with COVID. But also I think it's a reflection of, if producers are happy to buy livestock, which can change, they're also very happy to do machinery. Seeing good growth in property sales. I watched a property auction online the other day and I found it fascinating how quickly the price went over the reserve and kept going. There's plans to keep looking into areas that naturally would fit with the agricultural space of things. But at the moment, by far our biggest growth is clearing sales and machinery. We're putting on extra staff to handle that growth. And I also think that's a bit of producers are finally getting a chance with record high prices and
not feeding stock through drought and worrying about all the other things there, that they're actually getting down to some the back of the shed and seeing what's there to be sold.
Sounds good. So are the livestock assessments subjective? How is that managed?
I can jump in on this one if you like, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Huey.
Yeah, we try and keep the assessments as objective as possible. Obviously, there are areas that are subjective. These might come under temperament. My docile might be someone else's sturry. It could come into pasture quality. Again, the assessor could say good high quality pasture, but in other regions that could be low quality pasture. But the majority of assessments are as objective as possible. The weight, age, breed, health treatments are very black and white, so people don't sort of differ from that. But there are a few controlled subjectives that are put into the assessments.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely depends what region you're coming from. So how many people use the buy now function? Is it very popular? I think Holly, you touched on that.
Yes, I'm happy to answer that. So we have seen an increase in popularity of the buy now function, especially with what the market's doing at the moment. So I just quickly looked up before that there was 125 buy now offers in October, and 45 of those sold pre-auction. So what that sort of reflects is how different people use buy now as such, because a lot of vendors and assessors may put a much higher price on their buy now, knowing that they can change it before they actually go to auction. So they may put a high buy now price on it and think, well, if someone buys them for that, happy days. But they also know that they're still going to that auction where they can lower that reserve if need be. So it's certainly a popular option for people to use. But yeah, those October stats would reflect what they're currently sitting at the moment.
Yeah. With the wet summer prediction, how will this impact the market? What do you guys think?
I think that's right in my area. Yeah, given just the other day, this week the bomb came out and said another La Nina. I've lost several schnitzel dinners on, I bet you the EYCI can't go over 1,000. I bet you it can't go over 1,100. So my price forecasting is a bit out. But look, I think it's just going to be a situation of the cattle market is in a phase of get them at any cost. Not like the buy now, but one thing we are not seeing is buyers with an upper price limit. When we see markets that are falling or markets that have areas that are dry or producers that are much more sensitive to what they can purchase at, you know, there's always that get me some steers, but I won't pay more than 1,500 for them. We're not seeing that at the moment. It's really a just get them because I've got so much feed. I think that market continues till March, April. And let's see what the autumn winter run looks like. But gee, with another La Nina forecast, you know, autumn probably shapes up pretty well already. I said before, I think the young cattle market staying over 1,000 would be very optimistic come March. But you know, you could have a market back at 800 or 850 cents for the EYCI, and that's still, you know, take out the last 9 months, it had never been there either. So I think the price at the moment are fantastic if you're a seller. If you're a buyer, extremely uncomfortable. But given they've hung around for a while, you're selling back into the same market and buying into the same market. So I think we see it ease in 2022. I think the export markets look okay. I'd really start to see where regions, that wet season in Queensland's the crunch. If it delivers, the strong prices stay. If it fails, you know, I think we see some pressure come off in March, April.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we have time for just one more question. So I might send this one to you, Linda. If you use an agent, are they responsible for doing the NLIS transfer on the database?
No. So it's the responsibility of the the owner of the stock to do the transfer. You can certainly work out an arrangement with your agent to do it on their behalf, but they have to agree to do it. Basically, anybody, so either the person who is selling the animals or the person receiving can do a transfer, or anybody who has third-party access to either of those accounts can do the transfer. So if you are just like, look, I'm not computer literate, I can't deal with doing that myself, you can certainly engage someone to do it on your behalf, but you have to arrange that. That's your responsibility.
That makes sense. Rightio, guys, I think that's probably all we have time for. We haven't got through all of the questions, but we can definitely send out a fact sheet with the recording of the webinar so that we'll have all those questions answered for you. And we might include the contact details of some of our speakers today. I'm sure they'd love to answer all your questions. Also, one last plug, if you're still in Slido, or if you're not, you can pop back in and fill out our feedback survey and just let us know what you thought. All your feedback is really great, really helps us do more of these things, and like it helps us find out what you would like to know about. Also, a massive thanks to our presenters this evening, to Tim and his team and Linda from Murray Local Land Services. I think we've all enjoyed ourselves, and the recording will be sent out in a week or two with the fact sheet and the details. So thank you everyone for coming and taking the time out of your evening to be here, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks, guys.